On the agenda is we will move into our public hearing. This is a public hearing to consider the adoption of a revised Mason County Development Regulations, Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04 Rural Lands Development Standards, Section 17.04.602 and 17.04.612 with respect to motorized commercial outdoor recreation. Staff, Barbara Atkins.
Thank you. Barbara Atkins, Department of Community Development. This is a proposed code amendment to deal with motorized commercial outdoor recreation activities, to allow them as a permitted use without a special use permit. There are only two zoning districts that actually allow these types of activities, and it's rural tourist and rural tourist campground. So those are the amendments that we're looking at tonight. The first amendment would be in section 17.04.602, which is the uses permitted in rural tourist. And what the amendment basically consists of is it splits the motorized commercial outdoor recreation, which I wish there was an acronym for because that's a mouthful, into two different classifications. For these types of activities, they would be permitted outright without a special use permit on a single parcel or combination of adjacent parcels that are 100 acres or larger in size. That same type of activity proposed on a smaller piece of property, less than 100 acres, would still have to go through the special use permit process. The second zoning district is the rural tourist campground, and that code amendment is actually it's identical, splitting the commercial outdoor recreation into the ones that are larger than 100 acres on the single or adjacent combined parcels would not need a special use permit, and then the ones that are on smaller acreages would still need to get a special use permit. So some of the background discussion on this was due to some recent activities, or recent interest to have activities on a motorized commercial outdoor racetrack, we'll just call it racetrack. The special use permit that is currently on that piece of property limits the ability to do other things on it that might be complementary or adjunct to the racing events themselves. So this was a way to open up that process, take out the special use permit, which can tend to be confining and very restrictive, without going in and amending it, to remove that from them and other future tracks from having that same type of restriction. I'm not sure if there's more on the second page. No, but I will. That basically sums it up. It was basically to allow more activities on those without the necessity of a special use permit for the board's consideration. There was an item addressed in a brief that we received later this afternoon dealing with whether this needed to go through a SEPA review process. My interpretation was that I found it to be exempt under the exempt categories for a SEPA review because it was a procedural amendment to our codes, as opposed to one that actually impacted our regulations that deal with the environment, like our critical areas or shoreline or something like that, that would have directly impacted the environment. So I considered it to be exempt as a procedural action, therefore SEPA review is not done.
Anything further?
No.
I have a question. So why then would the SEPA been required at the first special use permit process? If it then, but not now. What's the difference between? What is the difference between?
So a special use permit requires a SEPA. There's no exemption for it.
Oh, I got it.
But this is an exemption just because it's a code amendment.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, one question.
Okay.
Is this red time?
No, usually we let the audience ask questions first, but if you
No, go ahead.
Is there anybody in the audience who has a question in regard to the presentation by staff? But I'd like to remind you, this is not a time to testify. This is only a time to ask a question in regards to the presentation that she gave. You will be given an opportunity to testify. With that being said, is there anybody who has a question for staff in regards to her presentation? Hearing none, Commissioner?
Sure, maybe I'll just chime in. This talks about a motorized commercial outdoor recreation activity greater than 100 acres. Is there any other location in Mason County that has a greater than 100 acre activity similar to this?
Not that I know of.
Now, we've had smaller activities planned or maybe
You mean
just-
racetracks?
Yes.
Didn't
very
they used to
small.
race at the airport?
Yeah, or small, or go-karts or something like that, but this is unique in that,
This is a first.
unique to its size.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, staff. We will close the staff testimony. We will move into public testimony. At this time, you'll be given an opportunity to testify and to talk with the commission in regards to the items that have been presented to you today. We ask that everybody be cordial and kind and respectful to each other. And if you have to get mad or get angry, please look at me and yell at me. I'm your target. That's okay. With that being said, though, we would hope that you would treat us with the same respect you would like to be treated. Is there anybody at this time who would like to testify in regards to this project for or against? In the center, please.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Alan Miller. I'm an attorney from Olympia, Washington. My address is 1801 West Bay Drive, Northwest, Olympia 98502. I'm here representing Kathleen Wilson, who is a resident of Mason County at 50 West Countryside Court in Shelton. And she is opposed to this rezone proposal. She lives about a mile from the Ridge Motorsports track, which is the subject of this special rezone, special change of the law. You will be hearing from Kathleen. You will also be hearing from Linda Wilson, who's her daughter, who visits her elderly mother quite frequently and will testify. There may be other people, I think, that have signed up to testify regarding this proposal to change the law. It's our position that the special use permit, which requires buffers and to limit noise for people that live so close to this motorsports track, that this rezone is to take away those protections of the public safety and health that were required in the special use permit by the hearing examiner about 3 years ago. We've submitted a brief, and I just wanted to project your attention to Exhibit A, which is an events calendar for what goes on at the motorsports track. This is a very busy motorsports track. It is at least 20, you can see from the calendar that at least 20 out of 30 days of a month on average are where there is noise being generated at this track. Exhibit B is a petition with 44 signatures of people within the neighborhood that are opposed to this rezone. We think there are two legal issues that you need to look at, and at least at this, and to deny this proposal at this time. The State Environmental Policy Act, which was briefly addressed in oral comments, is, if you look at the staff report, it's completely lacking that they did any SEPA analysis. There's nothing about some sort of a categorical exemption. If you look at the law, rezones, which is what's going on here, are subject to SEPA. You have to submit an environmental checklist. There's no environmental checklist that was submitted with this. And without the checklist, there's certainly no determination of environmental significance or non-significance, which is required. And I cite the ordinance 816-040 and 050 and 824-020 in the Mason County Code, which are violated by this procedural lack of SEPA analysis. Secondly, it's our position that this is spot zoning, that this is taking an area that as Commissioner Sheldon noted, or in answer to his question, found out that this is the only place in the county that where this type of activity is allowed, and the state courts have held that that is not a proper way to zone, that you have to look at a whole area. So we would ask that you deny this proposal at this point based on the SEPA violation, the State Environmental Policy Act. Attorneys like to use acronyms, and SEPA is the acronym for that. And then also for the spot zoning. Again, you will be hearing some factual testimony from witnesses, but again, I think this is inappropriate at this time and should be found to be denied at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Mind we ask you some
No.
questions? Clarify a few things. As for being, this is the only location for it to be allowed, what this actually does is allows for other areas underneath the standard of, what is it, rural?
Tourist,
Yeah, under,
rural tourism.
yeah, there's another term though that's more with it. But in the zone that, it just makes sure that they have to have over 100 acres. There are other parcels. We looked into that in the first place, that this would allow for that to occur under. And this only is in regards to the one zone. I have a question for you in regards to that. You're calling it a rezone. Now, I'm looking at it, and we understand it to be a hearing to consider adoption of and revising of the Mason County development regulations, not of a rezone. It will still stay the same zone that it is currently in. This just changes what can be used and done in that zone. Is there something different that you see that I do not?
Well, it is a rezone in our estimation, in our analysis of what's going on, in order to take it out of the special use permit, which currently applies to this. Whether or not you characterize it as a rezone or something else, it is still subject to the State Environmental Policy Act, and that violation would exist whether you analyze it as a rezone or as a other land use decision.
Okay, but it does stay in the same zone.
It is allowing different uses
Within a zone.
within a zone.
Okay. Commissioner Jeffries, you have a question?
I guess I had the same question. To me, there's a significant difference between changing allowed uses within a current, existing zone and changing the land use designation or the zoning of that. And so I guess I'm not understanding how you're seeing a code change as being a rezone. And because the
Well-
categorical exemption is applying, it's applying to the current action we consider to be an actual code change, not. And so that's why, to us, we feel like it falls under the exemption, or, staff, I agree with our staff, that it falls under our exemption, so provided in state law for SEPA.
And we disagree that it is exempt. Even if you are analyzing this as adding activities within a zone, it's still subject to SEPA. And you have to submit the documents.
Okay.
And I want to clarify, the actual term is rural tourist campground, the zoning that we are talking about amending. Do you have any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay.
Next, I would like to ask that the next person that volunteers to speak, please be in favor of the project. I'm going to go back and forth between you. And again, I ask that you not direct your comments to the audience, but direct it to the chair. With that being said, is there anybody who would like to speak in favor of the change? Mayor? That's you.
My name is Gary Krantz, and I am currently the mayor of Shelton, Washington. I am not here representing my commission or the city of Shelton, but I'm here representing my views from a mayor's standpoint, if you have a classification for that. That's the one I want to fit into. I live downtown Shelton at 629 West Coda. Don't try to send a letter there because we receive no mail at that house. We have a P.O. box, which I don't necessarily feel I need to give out at this time. Here's the deal. You're never going to get everybody to agree on everything. That's just a done deal. Right now, in my city, I'm facing the loss of 500 jobs. We are probably in such desperate need of economic growth and development and projects and jobs that I would look hard at this, I am speaking in favor of it, because I do not know in my heart that the noise level will be different from the activity that's going on right now, decibel-wise, as the activity that would happen with this change. I do not know that. I'm assuming there are those meters and that that's kind of how you judge things. Obviously, if I lived within a range and I heard the noise on Saturday and Sunday, I would probably be opposed to that. But you have to weigh out the individual's concerns and the noise levels based upon the whole general economic development council, tourism, financial package, and we desperately need that. And everything that I have heard of this group out there has been, they've always done things positive, above board, they've been very professional, and I just think that from what I see, the activity in downtown Shelton on race days, our motels are filling up, our restaurants are filling up. I just think it's a great place out there, and in my personal feelings, if the decibel level doesn't change, then I think I would probably say I would speak in favor of it, because we desperately, and in the city and the county, we desperately need jobs, economic, and tourism activities are rated right up in the top 1 or 2 lists on all chamber and EDC lists. They're rated right up there. So I just say that, in my opinion, I desperately think we need economic development opportunities, and I would speak in favor of it.
Any questions or comments for the mayor? Thank you,
You
Mayor.
mentioned, just real quick, you mentioned 500 jobs, but it could be, the indirect effect could be much, much,
Times 1.8.
1.8.
Yeah, and we are going to regain some of those jobs with the new mill that's opening up. But my whole life is trying to find money for my city, and this is an opportunity that I would look hard at the economic aspect to this, and I would encourage people to use real facts in determining exactly what that noise level and how far you are from it. That's just my opinion. Thank you for your time.
Mayor Krantz, thank you for coming
Yeah.
down.
Thank you, Mayor. Is there anybody who would like to speak again in opposition? Please.
My name is Kathleen Wilson, and I live at 50 West Countryside Court. And for those of you who don't know where that is, we're on a ledge right above the racetrack, within a mile, as the crow flies. I'll start out by saying I am not here to try and close the racetrack. I never have been, and I never will be. I mean, it's, in my opinion, it should never have been built, but that's my opinion. Anyways, here's my statement. In 1992, I found my special place of land on which I would build my house and live in the rest of my life. It was quiet and peaceful. When the racetrack was proposed, I objected due to the noise it would make. On some days when the track is running, the noise level is far greater than anticipated, and it all depends on what it is they're racing. When motorcycles are racing, I hear it, but I've told myself, well, I can live with it, it's not that loud. Other days, it has hurt my ear. By the time they quit, my ears and this bone back here on both ears is so sore I can hardly touch it. And not only I, but a lot of my neighbors have told me that they can hear it when they're in the house, which I can hear. And that is with my doors and windows shut. I have double pane windows and very good oak doors. It is for this reason I ask, actually I'm imploring you, do not change the zoning level as it is. As changing it would give the landowner the opportunity to do with as he wishes with the site, without regard to the very reason that the land use was designated as a special use permit, noise compatibility and such. And I had the manager of the racetrack up to my house. Of course, he came on the day when the motorcycles were running, and I asked him why did he come that day, because I couldn't hear them. And that's when he told me they were motorcycles. So he said, well, the next time you hear the noise, please call me, which I did the following week. They were, I don't know what they were racing because I do not go down there to look. But I could hear them very, very plainly. And so I called him and I said, well, I said, you're making a lot of noise today, so I said, would you like to come up? And he said, no. He said, I'm at the racetrack. And I said, well, yes, I knew that. And he said, well, I can't come up today. And I said, well, if you're racing the same things tomorrow, would you please come up? And he said, no. And he said, besides that, he said, I don't know what I can do. He said, there's no way of putting up anything to lessen the noise. So that's when I decided, well, I was going to do something. Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, one question. Please. You've got a second. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you hear the rifle range, the gun range at the State Patrol when they're active?
I'm not sure. I have at times, but I don't know how often they, I mean, I can't say that, yes, I hear them every time. I don't know, but I have heard them occasionally, yes.
Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you very much. Is there anybody who would like to speak in favor at this time? Please.
I'm Jay Hupp, 261 Southeast Brigham Court. I'm also a member of the Economic Development Council Board and chair the regulatory subcommittee. As you know, we're looking very deep into a lot of aspects of the comprehensive plan as it pertains to business development and the retarding force on business development in Mason County. However, I'm not here to speak on behalf of the Economic Development Council. This is more personal observations. I'm from two aspects. The first aspect, I'm encouraged that we're looking at a code change. That's really where the regulatory subcommittee is focused in attempting to change the reputation of this community as being a less than business-friendly community. And from the regulatory subcommittee's perspective, there's a lot of things that were built into the comp plan years back that have resulted in a less than friendly business development environment. This type of code change, I'm encouraged that it moves in the direction of being a little bit more business friendly. From the perspective of the impact on the community, I can speak from personal experience going back more than 60 years, having been involved with sports car racing here in this county as a young man. In 1961, this community had something stolen from it. It was a very valuable asset, and that asset was in the form of sports car racing at Sanderson Field. It brought tourism in here from all over actually all over the world, but particularly from the surrounding areas in the Pacific Northwest. That theft was the creation of Kent International Raceway, what Pacific Raceway today was called back then. And ever since, this community has not had the opportunity to participate in this aspect of tourism. We now have an opportunity, thanks to private investment, thanks to what appears to be the waning years of Pacific Raceways. We have an opportunity for this community to be what it was back in the 50s and the 60s as far as a mecca of sports car racing and motorcycle racing in the Pacific Northwest. And I would hate to see this opportunity squandered.
Any questions for Jay? Thank you, Chair. Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Linda Wilson. I live at 9875 Southwest Buckskin Terrace, Beaverton, Oregon. I am the daughter of Kathleen Wilson. I'm here to oppose, it's both two zones, 1704-602 and 1704-612, which is recreational tourist and recreational tourist,
Campground.
campground. I knew I was missing one of those words. So it actually is both that you're asking to remove the special use permit. And by your own code, you use the term special use permit to take care of issues when you are putting something into a zone that requires special consideration, noise being one of them, and impacts. A racetrack is definitely one of those things that requires a special use permit and should be continued to, that language to be used. I visit my mom anywhere from every 4 to 6 weeks. I have noticed the noise from every time I visit on the weekends. And I will agree with my mother that you can sit in the house. I was here just last Monday on May 18th. I was sitting in the house doing work because I can work remotely for my job, and I could hear the noise of the racetrack through the double pane windows. You can imagine what it sounds like when you're outside. Mother's Day weekend I was up helping, and I had earplugs in because of the type of project I was working on. I could actually hear the racetrack through my earplugs. So I enjoy the time with my mother. It's a relief when lunchtime rolls around and the track's not in session, or at 5 o'clock, or about what time they usually quit, and the noise stops. It's just a sigh of relief. I find it unfortunate the city of Shelton and the surrounding county is suffering economic downturns. It's also unfortunate that you are putting your own citizens at the expense, those 65 families and more that live along Eels Hill Road, as well as those folks in Dayton Trail, that you're also putting their lifestyles and the desire that they had of moving out to the country for peace and quiet. You're weighing that against economic support of the county. It shouldn't be a win-lose situation. It should be a win-win for everybody. So I hope that you will reconsider the zoning change or the language change in the regulations and vote against it. Any questions?
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak in favor at this time?
Bill?
Steve Bloomfield, 391 Southeast Domin Road, Shelton. And I would like to speak in favor of it. The racetrack is like Jay had said, a strong part of this community's history. And been here throughout the 50s and early 60s. And it's a shame it went away, and it went away in the manner it did. But the economics of that racetrack, if anybody's ever been to Willows, California, and looked what happened to that small community, it's unbelievable. The economic advantages that do take place there. And there's obviously language and wording that can be put in this that helps mitigate every problem. Ma'am, I appreciate you buying Milgard windows and Simpson doors. That's great for this community, and we all appreciate your efforts to go down that road. Thank you. That being said, I think we have to weigh the pluses and minuses of every job and every opportunity, and I think in this case, the pluses outweigh the minuses. And please take that into consideration in your careful determination of this balance. And thank you very much, and I appreciate that family investment that went into this a great deal. It's unbelievable.
Any questions for Steve? Thank you. Anybody, please, yes.
Lorraine McCulley, 21 West Countryside, Port Shelton. I'm Kathleen Wilson's next door neighbor. Anytime the microphone goes on over there at the racetrack, we can hear every word they're saying inside of our house. We didn't move to the country and pay for acreage to have everything destroyed. You know, I would invite any of you to come up to our houses when the race is going on and see what we have to hear. I mean, it's ridiculous to be subjected to this whole time. Now, we were told there would be buffer zones and all this. We haven't had anything there. They were supposed to leave their trees. There's not a tree on that road. And it just seems like they did not follow the original plan that they put out here for the residents. It just is not right. I am very dead set against this code change, but I also know that we're probably going to have to live with it. And I don't think it's right, because I think individual citizens should have a right to speak their mind also. Thank you.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Is there anybody who'd like to speak in favor? Please.
Can't really add anything else.
No? Lynn Long, Economic Development Council of Mason County. I'm going to look at my phone, excuse me, but I did ask Jennifer Beria from our staff to run some numbers through the economic modeling. I just wanted you to have a little bit of the economic numbers to help you in your decision. So, of course, the EDC is in favor of economic development. We consider this economic development. The Ridge owners and management have worked really well with the EDC. They've come to us and they've said, we want to be part of the community, we want to help, you know, what can we do to become part of the community? I think that we're very fortunate in this county to have this type of business and the type of investment that they've put into this community. We don't have a lot here in Mason County, so I think it's important that we recognize when we do have a family such as that doing that type of investment. So some of the numbers that she sent me are 1,267 tourism-specific jobs in our area are related to tourism. The total direct impact is $30.4 million. 1.5 million is the impact on local supply chain industries, and about 3.2 is actual payroll on tourism. And then the rest of it, when you add it all up, is about 30.4 that's direct. So I think those are really significant numbers, and again, you know, while you're deliberating and making your decision, I wanted you to have those.
Any questions? Go ahead.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition next? Now's your opportunity.
I'm not standing up there, but it's a beautiful place. The track is awesome. But on a positive note, can't they put a wall up? Just something nice and pretty along the road that would protect us from the noise.
Thank you. In favor?
Good evening. My name is William Lynn. I'm a lawyer representing the track. And I call it the track, although this is, as you've noted, this is a generally applicable zoning change. This is not something that uniquely applies to the track. It applies to all property with the zoning that you've discussed earlier. It is a little bit ironic that we're talking about noise here because this proposal won't change any noise. Some of the concerns are from people who wish the track would go away, but that's not on your agenda tonight. Really, what's before you is a purely procedural change. We have a use that's currently allowed in this zone. It's allowed through a special use permit process. And this proposal would make it allowed outright, as you've noted. So it's really a change on paper. It's a change in the process that would apply here. This project has gone through the Ridge, if we're going to focus on that, has gone through an extensive process, including SEPA. And there was a noise evaluation, there was a traffic study, there were gopher habitat studies, there were significant numbers of studies that were done. So again, it's a little ironic that we're talking about the absence of SEPA review, and this particular project is probably one of the most reviewed in the county, at least in recent years. So there has been a lot of SEPA review. There would also be SEPA review if there were changes that were proposed. Let's say, for example, that the Ridge proposed to install bleachers, changing the nature of the project to one that attracted more people. That would be an action that the county would have to approve. That would trigger review. It might be exempt, it might not, but the county would have to go through a review process. Similarly, if anybody proposed a track on other property in the rural tourist zone, there would be SEPA review. What the staff concluded was that SEPA review was not necessary here because what was being changed was a procedure, the manner in which the specific proposal would be allowed. And let me explain, if I can, why the special use permit process has been difficult. A special use permit process worked great if you're building a church or a school, something that's a specific use. Everybody knows what it's going to look like. Everybody knows where it's going to be located on the site. It works very well for that kind of use. Where it doesn't work well is when you have a use like this one that's evolving. We're trying to figure out what makes it work. There are going to be changes, and you can't run back to a hearing examiner with a notice and a public hearing process every time you want to change something about the proposal. And let me give you a couple of examples where we've had to face the prospect of a whole hearing examiner process. The Ridge proposed to put a pedestrian overpass over the track so that pedestrians could safely get up to a lookout where they could see several different points on the track. That was thought to perhaps require an amendment, having to call your hearing examiner down here and give public notice and invite everybody into this room and talk about a pedestrian overpass. The real ironic one is that one of the most contentious parts of the track, and certainly the one that would impact people the most, is a drag strip. And that was approved. So right now, the owners of the Ridge could go out and start building this drag strip tomorrow. They have concluded that that is not a good use of the land. And they have announced publicly that they plan not to do that, to some people's consternation, but to other people's delight. Well, what they propose to do with a portion of that land instead is to build a go-kart track, which would be much lower in impact than a drag racing facility. But that, again, because this special use permit zoning is so tight, would require another trip back to the hearing examiner, even though what's proposed is a proposal for the better. So a special use permit has just not been a very good tool for this particular proposal. This is not a spot zone because, as you've noted, we're not changing the zone. A spot zone applies if you take in the middle of a residential area and locate a 7-Eleven on a commercially zoned project or property. This land use has already been proposed or already been approved here. There's already been a process. The hearing examiner's already found that this is consistent with the zone and consistent with the area and consistent with the comprehensive plan. So this is not a spot zone. I do want to address the concern, and nobody, I guess, made any accusations, but the suggestion was made that the applicants are not meeting the conditions of approval, and that's just not the case. The noise monitoring that was required by the original approval has been done. The proposal actually operates at a lower noise level than is permitted. There's a provision in the examiner's decision that required contracts that would require monitoring the noise of each vehicle. The Ridge operators have actually adopted a more stringent standard, so they test the vehicles and actually require that they meet a better standard than was opposed. All the buffers, all the fencing, all the gopher habitat areas, and all the other amenities that were required have been installed, and would welcome any opportunity to demonstrate that to anybody who'd care to look. I think this is really just a procedural change. It's not going to make anything any worse. It's going to likely make it better. It allows some flexibility to respond to the marketplace, which I think the owners are happily finding is a good one, but also needs attention and needs some flexibility, and that's what they're seeking here.
Questions, Commissioner? Questions? I have one.
Okay.
One of the things that I've seen and that has me a little worried, I'm very much in favor of this and have been from the very beginning. But there's been an unintended consequence that has popped up, in my opinion. It has come to my attention that the racing has been exempted from our noise ordinance. And if we're no longer governed by a special use permit, then there is no noise governance on the racetrack. I'd like to know your opinion and if you think that that's accurate or if there's something I'm missing. I'm also curious about your opinion of including something that would just keep the same restrictions or something like it in the new measure.
First of all, there was a separate action by the county commissioners, actually before the special use permit was issued for this project, that did exempt racetracks. I think that's a provision of state law in the Mason County version of the ordinance that had not been carried over, but I'm not sure I recall that exactly. But you're correct. One of the consequences of this would be that the current noise restrictions that are in the hearing examiner's decision would not automatically be carried forward. I think you've heard from the owners that they are currently doing those things and more, but they would not, but were this to be made a use allowed outright, those would not carry forward. And the other answer to your question, I guess, is yes, you could certainly carry forward some restrictions. I guess the problem is how do you carry forward restrictions that you like without carrying forward some of the straitjacket provisions that really kept the owners from doing what's best for the track, and I think a lot of other people.
I'm only speaking on the noise. That's the only, the only one. Do you have an opinion or?
What I guess the challenge, and just, I hadn't really thought about that specifically, the challenge in trying to do it here is that you have a legislative action. You're taking an action to change the zoning code that applies to every RTC zone in the county. So I'm not quite sure how you'd pick a noise restriction out of a special use permit on one facility and bring it in to the code. And then I'm not sure how you would make a similar restriction apply to other tracks that weren't required to get a conditional use or a special use permit. I can see how it could be done, but it's not as easy as just saying it.
Any further questions? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Is there anybody who would like to speak in opposition? One more time, anybody in opposition?
I just have some
But
questions.
when you do have to come up, I'm sorry,
Alright.
I should not allow her, because
I just have a
what it is
few-
for the record, everything
Okay.
that is said goes on the
Okay.
record in case anybody wants to get a
That's
comment.
fine. My name is Virgil
Well, I'd
Lamont.
like to ask you to please say your name and where you're from.
My name is Virgil Lamont, and I live at 163 West Meadows Place, which is about a mile from these folks here. And I'm not opposed to any of this. I am opposed to the noise. I mean, I think the racetrack's a great thing. But when I'm working in my yard and I have to turn up my stereo to half volume because I have to listen to these dirt bike or street bikes race, that's just not right. So there's got to be able to way to muffle these things or put up a buffer. No, I know a buffer would be too expensive, but they should be able to muffle these bikes and cars somewhat for this particular track. I just don't know what else to do, but and it happens 4 days, 5 days a week. Now, Joe's a really good friend of mine, and I've known him since we were this big. I think it's a great thing that he's doing, but now I have to listen to it. Now, if I took a street bike in front of your house and sat there for 8 or 10 hours a day, would you like that? I'm asking you a question.
Well, we're not here for questions.
Oh.
This is testimony time.
Well-
Please feel free to give your testimony.
I don't know. I think the whole thing's wonderful. I think it's gonna help, but there's gotta be some way to muffle the noise.
Any questions, Commissioner?
Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody in favor? One more time, any testimony in favor? Then I will go back to any further testimony against, in opposition. One more time, any testimony in opposition? Hearing none, we will close this part of the public hearing and move to Commissioner deliberations. Commissioners?
Well, I can start. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank everybody for coming in their testimony because it's all heartfelt, and that's the kind of testimony that we really appreciate. I was born in this community in Shelton, Mr. Mayor, a long time ago. I remember the sports car racing that happened at the port, at the runway. And, you know, in 1960, it was kind of an interesting event that I think relates to this some way, just to set the stage. The Washington Department of Corrections, it's called something different at that time, wanted to build a new penitentiary. And there was a competition around the state. And the Mason County stepped forward with Simpson Timber Company that said they would sell a section of land, and the community gathered money and bought that section of land, and it was a very large undertaking, big project. And it had some environmental effects. I mean, there's lights on every night, very bright. It needs training for the officers, so they have a gun range at the state patrol camp, which can be very loud at times. So whatever the project is, there's always some impact. I think there's been very good benefits from the correction center, from the state patrol, and I think there's obviously very good benefits from the track as it's just beginning as well. I think an important point was made too, that this is not a drag strip. Drag strips are extremely loud. It takes a tremendous amount of capital and insurance to even have a drag strip. Because we're not having a drag strip, some people are very disappointed, but it's you need a lot of area, and this is not a drag strip. What wasn't noted was that the Planning Commission, our advisory board, did review this proposal and unanimously voted to approve it. And I also want to note that the adjunct activities, we talked a little bit about them, the things that will go on there that would not need an extensive permitting process, like civic events or food establishments, those types of things, I think are going to make things much smoother and more helpful there. So I appreciate all the testimony tonight, and I feel very comfortable with this action.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jeffries?
Well, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, land use decisions are always hard. There's no way to not have winners and losers, and they're very emotional, and they're tough decisions, and that's, I guess, why we get paid the big bucks. Huh? And you take a use like motorsports or airports and whatnot, and you'll never be able to put them in a place where everybody's happy that they're there. And so there's never going to be an answer here that would address everybody's needs. We as a community have embraced tourism as one of the economic legs of this community, and we need to build whatever we can, all of our regulations, all of our opportunities to embrace that. And motorsports is something that we've found out this community, as well as the outside world, our tourists are embracing with vigor. And if you know anything about business, you've got to jump on that bandwagon. One of the things that over my term as commissioner here noted that there were a lot of efforts that our current motorsports facility had been trying to do but couldn't because of the confines of their special use permit. And business needs to be able to turn on a dime, and economic development needs to be able to turn on a dime too. And so I am in favor of allowing outright motorsports, commercial motorsports activities in our rural tourist campground, because if we are going to see motorsports as a recreational activity be one of our cornerstones of our tourism activities, then we've got to be able to support those facilities, those private facilities that will support our economic efforts. I thank the developers and the owners of the Ridge Motorsports for bringing this recreation opportunity. I hope to see it grow in other areas of the county. Maybe we'll bring back the heyday of the 60s. And I think that we need to have our zoning and our development regulations reflect our desire to see the growth in those industries. So.
Thank you. I too have been in favor of this from the very beginning. You know, it's no secret we need economic development however we can get it, and this has been very successful. And I am in favor of changing the verbiage to allow it to be a standard usage within the tourist rural campground. I do, though, have an issue when it comes to an unintended consequence that's occurring where we are leaving them with absolutely no control underneath the noise ordinance. It sets a bad precedence. It's just bad for everybody involved. There was promises made. They may not have accepted or liked it, the people that lived there, but there were promises made that it would happen under this umbrella, under these restrictions. And to completely do away with that one main restriction that is bothering them the most, I think we would not be doing our job to protect them that we're supposed to. Because we need to protect both sides of this. We need to make sure that they can continue to develop as much as necessary, but there has to be a limit at some point to what the neighbors can deal with, or should be expected to deal with it. Because we're talking about neighbors that already have lived there before the track, not are trying to come in afterwards. You know, I have been doing some research in the last hour, and one of the opportunities that is before us is the ability to add some verbiage to this. And there are certain restrictions and things that can't be put into the code itself, such as the restriction that motorized commercial outdoor recreation is limited to a single parcel or a combination of adjacent parcels under single ownership, no less than 100 acres total in size. That's part of this code. With that being said, this is part of this code, we could easily take part of the things that was agreed to. It's just a very simple one, stating that the noise levels exceed the 57 dBA, the maximum allowed by the county noise standards for any structure, I would say any structure outside the boundary lines of the project that exists as of 1/1/16. The applicant shall propose and implement mitigation measures as approved by staff to bring sound levels down to the 57 dBA or establish to the satisfaction of staff that no reasonable mitigation is available. I'm not creating this. This is what's they already do. And they've done it very well, I think, because I do know that they actually test these people when they come out there. But with that being said, in absence of this, if that completely disappears, although I know they're great people and they always do good things, you just never know what tomorrow holds. If somebody else buys it or anything else, anything is possible. So again, being the chair, I cannot make that motion. I'm just pointing out that I think that we should include that into our verbiage. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion, however you decide.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, I know it would be hard, I think it would be very difficult to make an oral amendment like that too at this point. And I think as perhaps pointed out to us is that this is not the place to insert that. So I would move that the Board of County Commissioners recommend approval of the revisions to Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.04 Rural Lands Development Standards, Sections 17.04.602 and 17.04612 with respect to motorized commercial outdoor recreation as proposed.
I'll second that motion.
Yeah, it's been moved and seconded for the Board of County Commissioners to approve the revision of Title 17, Chapter on Zoning, Chapter 17.04, Rural Lands Development Standards, Section 17.04.602 and 17.04.612 with respect to motorized commercial outdoor recreation as proposed. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, I sympathize and I do understand your request here. I believe that there's so many different things that need to be researched that I couldn't make that second one. If that's something you want to bring up again, and if you would give the adequate staff review, the adequate legal review, the adequate discussion about what that would do through testimony, I'd be open to it. But I just feel like that is generic enough. It could also create unintended consequences as well.
I would agree. I think unintended consequences are something we should avoid. And as I say again, I think oral amendments are dangerous to do when you're looking at this type of legislative action the board could take.
And I myself, although I think there should be a change, hearing no motion on that, and the motion is to adopt it, I am still in favor of it, and I hope that we will pick this up and do something else to fix this problem, because I do think it is a problem. But we definitely need to continue to move forward and allow them to move forward with bringing possibilities to the community. So with that being said, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. The motion carries. Hearing is closed.